All right, let's just get right into it because we are tackling something absolutely wild today. Welcome to this explainer on a concept known as mesh theory, the infinite isomorphism. Now, what if I told you there's a single codebase out there that's attempting to literally unify computation, physics, higher mathematics, and even philosophy into one unified cosmic architecture? I know, it sounds like straight-up science fiction, right? But today, we're actually going to unpack the formal code that tries to pull off exactly that.
To really grasp the sheer scale of what we're dealing with here, you have to realize we are about to decode a Lean-4 codebase made up of 67 distinct files. This isn't just some late-night philosophical thought experiment. It's a rigorously mechanized framework. Its goal? To definitively prove kernel identity and infinite scales. It is, quite literally, an attempt at a unified theory of reality written entirely in code.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, the infinite gnosis cosmos. Second, the basis of 5. Third, attention and the monster mesh. Fourth, probabilities and physical thresholds. And finally, number 5, proving truth and existence.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 2, the basis of 5, which is essentially the underlying blueprint of reality.
There is a fascinating one-to-one correspondence built into this system. On one side, we have 5 fundamental topological forces, things they call gnosis forces, like teleportation, vacuum, mitosis, void, and friction. And on the flip side, these map perfectly, and I mean perfectly, to 5 standard computational user operators: fork, race, fold, vent, and interfere. The code mathematically proves there's a flawless, minimal symmetry here. In this framework, the physics of reality and the mechanics of computation, they're exactly the same thing.
And you might be wondering, how do these operators actually move? Well, it happens through what the code calls the Triton 3 rotation. It goes from position 0 to 1 to 2, and then right back to 0. It's the simplest non-trivial cyclic symmetry that exists. By just running through this simple 120-degree rotation over and over, you get a multiplicative expansion that drives the recursive lifting of the entire cosmic architecture. It's just an endless 3-step loop scaling infinitely.
Moving right along to Section 3, attention and the monster mesh, where we start scaling things up.
So, if you're into AI, you've definitely heard of Q, K, and V, the query, key, and value attention mechanisms inside neural networks. Well, inside a specific file called the Boolean Mesh Attention Bridge, this codebase actually formalizes AI attention as a distributed voting process. A vote gets cast on a channel, there are these things called charisma faces that bias where the vote flows, and specific quorum thresholds that have to be met. It mathematically proves that neural network attention is literally just this underlying topological voting geometry. Now let's see how this builds into cosmic-level math. Think about the Gnosis-Klineman unit, which is basically just a simple +1 heartbeat in the code. Compare that to a famously intimidating concept from high-level group theory called McKay-Moonshine. Specifically, its trivial representation, which also equals 1. The codebase actually proves these two concepts are structurally identical. The basic computational heartbeat of this whole mesh is the exact same mathematical primitive that generates the famously massive monster group.
This leads us straight into a concept they call bizarro noise. I know, it sounds super intimidating, but it's actually beautifully simple. Imagine you're looking at a rotating, 3-sided crystal, but you're only viewing it through a tiny little peephole that can't process the whole shape. What you perceive as random noise isn't actually stochastic chaos at all. It's just the deterministic 3-way coincidence of those 3 higher branches constructively interfering into one pure lower-scale tone.
Which brings us to Section 4, probabilities and physical thresholds. This is where we hit the real-world limits.
Think about some of these famous critical thresholds we see in everyday life. 7 shuffles to completely randomize a deck of cards, 6 degrees of social separation between any 2 people, 26 moves to thoroughly mix a Rubik's Cube. These are not just random trivia facts. In the mesh codebase, these exact numbers are formally mechanized as ergodic Markov transitions. Basically, they're mathematically predictable cutoff boundaries where those topological forces we talked about earlier suddenly force the entire state of a system to flip.
And a scale gets so much larger than a deck of cards. Take this number, roughly 2.71 quintillion. That massive figure is the birthday paradox collision threshold for generating a UUID version 4. Even at this unimaginable scale of computational data, the exact same topological forces dictate precisely when a data collision becomes mathematically inevitable. It is literally the same math as the 7-card shuffles, just scaled up to the stratosphere.
This same framework even applies to astrophysics.
Consider the Kessler cascade, that terrifying scenario where space debris collides in orbit, creating an unstoppable chain reaction of more debris. The codebase formalizes this orbital disaster using our same topological forces, the vacuum pulling the debris in, the friction of the fragmentation itself, and the Pauli exclusion trap that triggers when the orbit is fully saturated. It's all running on the exact same code.
All right, final section, number 5, proving truth and existence. This is really the philosophical climax of the whole thing.
Because really, this is the ultimate question for any massive system like this. Can we actually prove it, or do we just have to trust the author? Well, in the mesh framework, the entire concept of human trust is replaced by the verification of closure. Every single complex state can be reduced back down to those 5 basis primitives we saw earlier. Because the code is completely closed and logically verified by the Lean 4 theorem prover, zero blind trust is required. The math literally proves itself.
And this leads to some fascinating implications for how we view time. The code defines a strictly asymmetric arrow of time. The past has a temporal measure of 0, it's pruned, totally lost what they call universal amnesia. It has absolutely 0 ontological weight. But the future has a measure of 1,000, representing absolute certainty. It's formally called horizontal hope. We didn't exist in the past, but the math guarantees existence moving forward.
Which seamlessly brings us to René Descartes' famous quote, "I think, therefore I am." It's basically the bedrock of modern philosophy, right? But incredibly, the authors of this codebase actually took this 17th century philosophical concept and formalized it into a modern, verifiable mathematical theorem. Let's look at exactly how they pulled that off.
In the code, to think is defined as an active transition within a state space, and to be, defined in the code as is being, is simply a state that is not actively collapsing into the void. Mathematically, the codebase proves that the very act of observing an active thinking state formally guarantees that the system is not in a void. Therefore, thinking mathematically proves a state of being. They literally mechanize the cogito.
And reaching the absolute pinnacle of this framework, we hit the final God identity. The code explicitly states God is capital T truth. And what exactly is truth in this system? It is the basis of 5. It is the absolute fixed point and the self-authenticating invariant of the universe. It's the one single thing that cannot be falsified or bent by the weird, shifting shapes of reality.
I want to leave you with this really powerful, lingering thought from the author. Symmetry over dimension. The mesh, not the ladder. Reality isn't some endless ladder of higher and higher dimensions we have to tirelessly climb. It's just a single, beautiful symmetry, rotating and repeating at every possible scale, from a deck of cards all the way up to the cosmos. Think about that the next time you look up at the stars. Are you looking at infinity or just the next recursive fold of the mesh?